I'm Yorick. I'm one of the main developers of FreeCAD. I won't talk again about FreeCAD because we all saw it, and this was really a cool presentation. I find it always hard to do it better than I would have done myself. It's always hard to do, like something you're used to, and you have to explain, and I find it something hard, and you did quite a nice, cool thing in 1 hour exactly.
Thank you.
If I go a bit too much with the time, please tell me and I stop. So I'll talk basically about programming in FreeCAD. I think this is one of the features we don't see very often, and it's basically the treasure and the magic behind FreeCAD, and it's really easily accessible. Have all of you heard about Python language? Any of you have no experience at all with programming? Or everybody knows a bit of programming? Okay, then I can go a bit faster about what is Python, and so yeah, it's a fantastic programming language. It's used everywhere in the open source world, in the closed source world. Basically, any program out there that has a bit of an interface for programming, someone has made a Python plugin for it. So I always tell people, if you have to learn one language to do them all, it's definitely Python. It's easy to learn, and it's a fantastic thing. In FreeCAD, the core of FreeCAD is programmed in C++, but there is a big part of FreeCAD that's programmed in Python. I would say almost 50%. All the glue between the FreeCAD actually can run in a terminal without its interface, and all the glue between that server part of FreeCAD and the interface is made with Python, and that's something really cool. If you open this Python console here, you just go in Edit, in View, Panels, and here is the Python console. I always recommend people to, if you're interested in learning Python coding in FreeCAD, leave it open. Usually when you install FreeCAD, it comes open by default, but leave it, because you will see what happens. If this window is open, everything you do here prints a comment here. For example, I click on those buttons, and you see that it's doing something here. So actually, in most of FreeCAD, every time you push a button, it executes actually a line of Python code, or more than one line for some commands in that window. So that's really the main mechanism of FreeCAD. Everything you do actually does Python code here. And this window is also an interpreter. It's where you can write Python code as well. There are other places to write Python code that are easier than this one. But it's, for example, you see this thing that has been printed here to make the view in front view. You can replicate that. I can come here and tell the same thing, GUI dot active document. There are two ways to write active document, or this way or this way, but it's the same thing, active view, and you see it has this autocomplete with the help. You can, with the arrows, every time you write a dot in Python, you know that if you write a dot, you're going to take a member of this active document. So here, active document is a part of GUI module, and then I'm browsing through all the members of active document. Basically all the properties and functions that exist inside this active document object. Here I will take the active view, and I can do this view And if you browse to here, you see that some have better help. You have always a help description, and it mimics quite well what happens in the menus. So basically, that's something we try to do in FreeCAD. That the way you go through the Python class and function and such is similar to what you find in the interface, in the menus, etc. I will show you a bit better now. So I will do this, view top. It was already in view top, but if I rotate the view, I can here use my up arrow and down arrow to go back and to take a last comment and to print it up again. So I can do one time the up arrow, and I get the last comment, and I can press enter to do it again. And you see that it came back to top view. So it's completely interactive. Everything you do here, you're driving the interface the same way as you do by clicking buttons. And in some cases, in many cases, it's faster. You can access pieces. I will show you a bit more in a moment. So here, you've seen that in the previous workshop, we used this workbench, the Sketcher workbench, and the Part Design workbench. All these workbench, they also exist in this Python console. So basically, you have here two main modules, which are FreeCAD and when I start, when I write a dot, I open the autocomplete, and this is the active document. You see that FreeCAD has a shortcut, which is app. Active document does the same thing. And we have FreeCAD GUI, or GUI, which is its shortcut. So those are the two main modules, Python modules of FreeCAD. Most of the general commands and tools of FreeCAD are in these two. Why two? It's because that's, as I told you, FreeCAD is separated between, it can work without, it can work as a server. You can put it on a machine with no interface. For example, it can drive a website because it has no interface. And there is the interface, which is the GUI part. And they are pretty much independent. So that's why everything in Python is also separated. You have things that work in the GUI and things that work only without any visual existence. For example, you can model without seeing it. You could think, I will model a cube and I will remove a cylinder from it. You can do that, everything in the app part without showing it. And you could export that to some format or feed it to another system without any need to open the interface. You could process that on a server, things like that. And that's where all these possibilities begin to be interesting, that you can begin to think, no, I could replace the interface of FreeCAD by a web interface. That's easy. It's already, you would just not use the GUI module and invent your own module to interact with the app part. And it's all made, inside FreeCAD, all the glue between the two is done in Python. And we have all the workbenches here. So, for example, the Sketcher here, in Python, to add a new module inside your current interpreter, you use import commands. Almost all programming language has a kind of way to add more modules to your current workflow. So I can import Sketcher. And then now I have Sketcher dot, and I have lots of tools from the Sketcher. Same thing with others. For example, import part design dot, and you begin to have all the stuff of part design. So basically that's how it works in this console. You just import your modules and use the content of the module the same way as you would like switch to another here and to another workbench and use its tools here. So we always try to mimic the thing between Python and the interface, and that makes it really convenient and easy. And there is one way that is really cool if you never worked with Python coding before and you want to quickly make something. That's something I haven't told yet. With Python, from the Python code, from this console, you can do basically anything in FreeCAD. We can model geometry, but we can also change the interface, because the interface here is made with Qt, which is an interface framework, and it also has Python modules. So we can basically here import the, for example, which is named pside. That's basically the Python module of the Qt interface. I'll give you a very short example. I think it's yeah, I can just give it 2 strings. No, it wants more things. It wants a parent. Okay. So I just see that this dialog that this box that I just did with one line, it has the FreeCAD icon, so it knows that it runs inside FreeCAD. It's really wild that you really need very little to begin to do stuff like this. And you could put panels, new panels here, you can add buttons here, you can basically add your tools really easily from a couple of lines. All this is on the FreeCAD documentation. There are examples for, I will now do more example of creating geometry book, because I think it's more interesting. If you guys prefer to see more tricks with the interface, just tell me, and I do more of that. But there are also a lot of built-in ways to make that easier. And there is a lots of stuff to do with the interface, and that's really actually that's something that surprised me when you are in CAD programming. I was thinking that all the geometry and the trigonometry would be the hard part, and actually the interface is the hard part, because it's all about I want to make such a piece, and how many steps to get there, and what's the best user workflow to get there, and it's surprisingly hard. Everybody has different idea of what's the best way to get there, and how your interface must respond to that and accommodate all those uses really, really a hard problem. It's all about interface. It's crazy. So having a big, such an easy toolset is amazing. There are programs for you to design your dialogues. You can draw. It's like a draw application where you draw your buttons and etc. And you can use what that program does. It's named QDesigner, and you can use the result of that program to create dialogues, nicer dialogues. There are lots of possibilities. That's the interface, and you can also, of course, create contents inside FreeCAD, geometry, etc. That's what I will show now. And you can also, here in FreeCAD, let's say I will take a simple object. This object that I just created, a cube that I created, what you see on screen is actually, I will change this. Yeah, there are here several mouse modes that can be useful. If you hover your mouse here over that button, you see what each button of the mouse does. And I like this gesture because left button is rotate, right button is move, and I find it really cool. But you have many to choose from, and just take one and hover your mouse here, and you see how it works. And maybe you can find a mode that's more convenient for you. So this cube that I created here, again, it has a geometry definition that has no visuals, and then it has a visual part. That's how it appears on the screen. That means that these faces are rendered as gray rectangles, and then you have this line, etc. I can inspect things. That's one of the first use we do of the Python console. For example, am I sure this is a cube? I could have import this object, and I'm not sure what's inside. Maybe instead of one line, it has two lines very close to each other, and then it would have 13 faces instead of 12, or I mean instead of 8, 9 instead of 8. I can find this cube here in several ways. One way is to right-click here and send to Python console. If I do that, it created for me this. I could also take it by go fetch it myself. You saw that I could get the active document. I do FreeCAD, active document, and inside my document I can take my box. This cube here, it's named cube here, but every object in FreeCAD has a user modifiable name that you can here. I can rename it if I want, and it also has an unmutable internal name. That's more or less its ID, and it cannot be changed. That's so that any object in the document has a specific name. It's its ID. It cannot be changed, and you cannot have two objects with the same ID. If you hover your mouse here, you see here internal name box. That's its internal name, and I can take my object with that name. FreeCAD, active document, box. That's here my object. What I will do is create a variable with it. My cube is equals that. Now my cube is my object here. All these objects have, that's the interesting part. You see that our cube here, if I go in the properties, I have here several properties that I can change here. All right? Now, my cube, all these things here are also available here. My cube dot, what was it that I changed? Length. Dot length. 20 millimeters. I could change that. Equal and it changed. So again, everything you see.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if that's something to change. The gray parts in the Python console are really hard to see from here. So the equal signs, dots.
Oh yeah, and yeah, indeed. Let's change the color. Operator, I think that's this one. Yeah.
Cool.
Better? Yeah. You saw that even that panel that I opened is this one. Everything you do, every button you click, print something here. And so, for example, if I change here, look at what it did. So it took, instead of active document, this command took a certain document, which can be useful if you have two documents open. It's better to take it by its name than, because you might be wrong about which one is the active one. Normally it's the last one where you did something. If you change your view, the active one becomes the other one, but you could be wrong and you could take an object that's in the wrong document. So it's this way is of course better. You sure it's that document and that object, and we change its width. If I change its name here, rename to my cube. Oh, this is, yeah, some stuff is still not fully implemented. I just saw something that's not appearing in the console. That happens. But basically, let's model a little bit further. See what happened here. What I could do, that's a cool thing about the interface. You can also do this. You can like put the panels one on top of the other, or join them, or place them in other parts of the interface. And most of the interface is movable that way. Yeah, but it's not cool because now I don't see anymore my. Yeah. Okay, that seems good to me. So we can see what happens in the Python console while I did stuff. So I created this cylinder. This is how it did it. And I will move it somewhere in the middle. So I will change its placement here, and I will move it to like 10 here and 10 here. And you see that it changed simply its placement here. So everything happens here actually. Now I could do, for example, boolean cuts, and if I look better what happened, it creates first here. first it created a new object, that is this cut here. You see that every time you do this operation in FreeCAD, you add a new object that takes the other, and you go growing your modeling history that way. So it's every time it's a new object, and that's why they are called features and not objects, because sometimes a whole is a features, but it's hard to call a whole an object, so because it's not physical. So it's called features, and feature is really these operations that you add on top of your shapes. And that's the typical modeling way in FreeCAD, is that you start from something simple and you add features. In the other workflow, that's we start from one main object and then we added features like the holes, etc. It's how it goes. So here a new object was added, which is of type part cut and which is named cut. Then this object, it has two properties, base and tool. Where are they? Here, base is the box and tool is the cylinder. And that's all you need to make it work. You give it its base object and you give the object that must be subtracted. And that's what happens in these two Python lines. And then this is cosmetic. It's just hiding the two other objects, because this one, you see that this one is shown and these two are hidden. But I could show them, I could still show them that they're still there. And that's usually how FreeCAD works. The last feature is shown and all the intermediaries are hidden. But they're still there, you can still modify the properties. And an interesting thing, for example, I still have my cube here, right? My cube. Yeah. All these objects that have a shape, they have a shape property. And that's really where all the geometry of it is stored. For example, in this, my shape faces. And these are the 6 faces of my original cube. I could do this too. This len is to calculate the length of a list. So to make sure I have 6 faces in my original cube. I could look at my cube shape, faces. I will look at the first face and I will take this face area. This is always in millimeters. If you don't have units in FreeCAD, it's millimeters. That's face 1. I could take other things like volume. That's again in cubic millimeters. If there is no unit, it's millimeters always. And I could take, for example, my cube edges. These are all the lines of my cube. I will take the first one and its length, 10 millimeters. I could even do something like this. The part module has some shortcuts. All right. Now I created a new shape, which is here. I duplicated this part, show, take any shape and create a new object with it in the document. I use that often to, what is that I have, that shape that I'm working with, and you show it, and you can do a lot of those kind of operations. Now, one thing I want to show you that is really interesting is the macro system. In FreeCAD we have this macro system that's here. Basically, there are no macros currently. I don't know if you have internet access here. Yes, if you go to the documentation wiki, you go to the macros, and it explained everything, and then where are the macros recipes? And we have a repository of macros created by users, and you have just lots of incredible things there. And these macros are all, for example, this is a very small script. It's basically a short piece of Python script that is executed when you click a button. And you can easily record macros. For example, let's say I will I will make a new macro. And let's call this macro create cube, or create box, let's say. And I start recording. And when I do that, okay, I'll put it in your home here, okay? But you will have some macros in your home folder that you need to delete afterwards. So once it's recording, everything you do here, basically everything that happens in this window here is recorded, and it's simple as that. So I can start modeling. For example, I will go in draft, I will create a rectangle, and I will go in parts, and I will take this rectangle and extrude it. That's the same thing that we did with part design, the previous workflow. It can be done with part. I will let it 10 millimeters. That seems good to me. Right. I create my cube. I create it twice. I don't know why, but I delete one. Okay. That's done. I can stop the recording of my macro. And now I can go back in my macro menu. You can do basically anything just to test. I check my macro here, and here it is. And you see that it's a copy of what happened here actually. And all these things that begin with the cross are comments. You can remove them if you want. I can clean up a little bit. There is a lot of things, but we could simplify this a lot. All these GUI commands, we don't need them. Actually, there is a setting in macro recording to not record the GUI commands. That's I usually add, because and you see that if I remove those things, it begins to get really clearer. What we did here is created FreeCAD placement. A FreeCAD placement is basically an object that contains a position and a rotation. and all objects have one. And so if you change the placement, you change the position and rotation of the object only. And it has no influence on the internal shape of it. So you could have this table, and you just change its placement, and you can position it in a space without having to recalculate its geometry. So this is our FreeCAD placement. Here a rotation is calculated, but you see that this is actually 0 because it's a very, 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 very small number. Then it has, this is the position, and then this is a rectangle, a draft rectangle of this side. I picked 2 points on the screen, so it's obviously not precise. But if I want, I could change all this here. Let's say I will make this 10, 0, 0, and then I could make a better cube. 12 by 10. Again, when I don't say the unit, it's millimeters. Then this serves to group the draft as a system to auto-group objects. If you are inside the group, working inside the group, all the objects go in that group. I don't need this. This is important in FreeCAD. The shape of an object is not always immediately recomputed because sometimes it can take a long time. For example, if you have one object that depends on another, depends on another, depends on another, it's like a big chain of objects, one depending on another. So it could take time to recalculate. Therefore, in Python, you have to say yourself when you want to recalculate the whole geometry. Because all the objects that need to recompute will be recomputed. So I won't recompute now. I will just leave that for later. And then this is a parked extrusion. This is all the code that FreeCAD has generated itself. I will not touch it. Now save this, Control S saves the macro that I just edited, and now I can just go back in my macro here and execute. I did something wrong, maybe I just deleted too much, I think. Let's do one again, a simpler one. Cube. I just make a couple of objects and I finish. Now this one I won't change anything. I begin to have a bit too much stuff here. And then in my macros I have this cube and execute. Now it worked. Probably I did a bit too much in the first one and I deleted the line I shouldn't have deleted. So that's really a nice way to begin to automate things. For example, I could do other things where it's useful to script things. For example, I would like to make a series of 10 boxes. I could make one box. I will use the part module again. I'll make one base cube. What was this box? No, it's make box, I think. Make a box. Yeah, and you see the help text explains you how to use this function. And make a box, I have to give length, width and height, and that's enough. Make box, length, width
and height. You see that it didn't appear on screen because I didn't create an object for it. I just created the shape. So to have it on screen, I need to create an object and give this shape to its shape attribute. That's how you attach a shape to an object. And the objects also hold the shapes, but also the placement and other stuff. And the other properties of that object make the shape recalculate. For example, if you change the length, etc. But here I won't do it that just yet. I will duplicate that cube several times, and then I will make a list. Final cubes is an empty list, and I will just throw 10 cubes in that list that I will create. I will copy my base cube each time a little bit further. So I'll make a loop for I in range 10. This will make my I value go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And for each of these values, we will move our base cube 10 units or 20 units, 20 millimeters right, because it's 10 millimeters wide, so let's move it 20. So first is current, I will do a current cube is the copy of base cube. So my base cube is not moved. Of course, I could not do that and move the base cube and each time copy it just a little bit further. But let's say they do it that way. So the base cube is always at the base position. And then current cube translates by a vector. A vector is in FreeCAD is a point in the 3D space. So it's 3 number x, y, z. It's a coordinate in space. A vector, let's say 20 times I, zero, zero. And 2 parentheses because I opened 2 as well. And arrow here. I did something wrong. Fortunately, yeah. Yeah. Okay, and now okay, now my final cube is a list of 10 new cubes. It's okay what just happened now, or should I explain better? Okay. And then, well, I will create a shape that's a union of these 10 cubes, and I will use that as my object that I will show on screen. So I will make what's called a compound. Is a part. A compound is not like an union. A compound is just a container for any kind of shape. You can put there solids, edges, faces, and it behaves as one object. But it doesn't have necessarily a coherent topology. But it's a cool container shape. Of course, you can have junk there, so you use it when you made it yourself and you know what it's inside. Otherwise, it's annoying to work with. Make compound. and it takes as an argument a list of other shapes. And then I will do part show comp. And here are and then you begin to see that sometimes this approach, if you need to, let's say you need to model something really complicated, but which is made of really simple stuff. I'm thinking of this furniture at the bottom there, where you would have like a lot of small holes, and then you have to put a drawer in all those holes, and doing that by hand is. You begin to see that you could do it faster that way. You would just program, take the height and the width and divide by so much, and make a cube and subtract the cube from the big cube. And if this is a script that you wouldn't type here like I did, but you would type it otherwhere, somewhere else, and you would change. You run it. It's not good. You just go there and change the value. Run it again until it's okay, and it's often at some point it becomes faster than doing it by hand. And you could also have systems. Yeah, it's time, but I'm basically at the end. So you could imagine systems doing that. You could have some kind of input that's driving your modeling, and you could model based on, I don't know what kind of input. That's another strength of Python. You can plug in all kinds of modules. There is a module for, I suppose it's not installed here, but you could import. There is a Twitter module. Of course, it's not there, but it's just a matter of installing. And then you have all the functionality of Twitter, and you could use that inside FreeCAD, and you just could take some number values from Twitter and use that to model stuff. And so the possibilities, when you begin to think of it, become endless. Or you could do the contrary. Use some, let's say, calculate the volume of what I did here and use that as input for something else. And that's really where the crazy possibilities are. And this is basically the underlying of the whole interface of FreeCAD. It all works with that Python code, and that's where you just program stuff. I'm basically at the end. I just wanted to show you where to look for stuff on the FreeCAD wiki. Here we have this user hubs, which is the documentation for users. Basically, it explains all the workbench and what you have in each workbench. That's pretty much use documentation. But the second category here, Power User Hubs, is where all the Python stuff is documented. And then you have here, we have a small introduction to Python for who doesn't know how it works yet, who doesn't know how to code. We have stuff to add buttons on the interface. We have stuff, yeah, how to create a new command, how you make the icons. We have stuff here. This is interesting. This how where is it? Yeah, all the way shapes are constructed. You have vertex, and between two vertex you can have a line or a curve. When you have lines or curves that form a closed shape, you can make a face. When you have face together, you can make a shell. And when you have a closed shell, you can make a solid. And so it's all kind of a pyramid of elements, and that's how you build your stuff. And you have here examples how you would build something like that. You would create vertices, etc. You have how the scene, the 3D scene is constructed. So you could print stuff on the screen that are not actual objects. For example, you can draw like temporary lines or widgets, stuff like that on screen. You can do that from Python as well. And finally, the interface itself, which is by side, and you have lots of example of what you can really easily do with a bit of code like this. You can begin to make complex systems in interactions, and I would say basically today like 50% of the FreeCAD developers were people without programming background, who were just user, who came there and began to read this stuff and got interested, and no, I need this tool, and they begin to program a small tool like that, and the thing grow, and they have a workbench they made with like 20 tools, and they begin to. It goes really fast, and from Python you basically do anything in FreeCAD. There is not much we used to say. No, you can use C++ if you like it, but don't need to. You can do anything in Python. You have really old programmers who work only with Python. I work mostly in Python as well. Don't like much C++, and it's really on par. Like any function that exists in C++, we have it in Python as well. And I guess that was it. Yeah, you have example. We have lots of examples, like how to create dialogues. This is interesting. Yeah, you use this. This is the program I told you, the Q designer. You can design a nice dialog box like that, and you just put your text and your fields there, and it works right off the box in FreeCAD. And you have, yeah, and all the functionality, what we call the API, which is what is there in the draft module, what's there in the FreeCAD module. Everything is there as well. So I guess that's it. Anything you guys want more to know? Any questions? Things that were unclear? Then we're done. Thank you for listening, and I hope it wasn't too boring.
No, interesting.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.